f3. Just simply very bad position. Again, I cannot go into very big details, but this is real bad position for black. So after knight d7, we go bishop e2, and still black cannot go after white's bishop. So now black goes queen e8. Now why queen e8? They want to play e5. Now why queen e8 and not rook e8 to play e5? Rook e8 does not help black to get e5 in. The reason is, if we go h3 to prepare the h2 square for the bishop, or just simply castle, e5 is losing for black, because white plays d takes e, and simply knight takes e5, winning a pawn. As you can see for yourself, knight takes e5, queen takes d8, followed by bishop takes e5, and white is a pawn up in a relatively simple position. So we just noticed that rook e8 does not support e5 move, but queen e8 does. On queen e8 we have to play h3, because when black plays a5, we want our bishop on h2. We don't want our bishop on g3, for example. If we castle, black may go e5, and on bishop g3, knight h5. It's very essential that white keeps the dark square bishop alive, and I'm going to show you why. Queen e8, h3, e5, bishop h2, queen e7, castles, and maybe some move like rook e8 or c6. This looks like a very reasonable position for black, and in reality it's really, really terrible position for black. White goes simply b4 or rook b1, probably b4, and next move is pawn c5. The idea is to go c5, and white is hitting black's center at d6 and e5 squares, and bishop on h2 plays very important role in that. So suppose black goes e4, knight d2, and rook e8. Now white goes c5 anyway. Black is practically forced to close the center, and you see the power of h2 bishop. It's a very strong bishop. Now if white simply goes b5, black's days are totally numbered, because queen a4, bishop d7, rook b1. Now black cannot put any piece on b8 square, no rook, because bishop on h2. And next move is b takes c, white's pieces penetrate on b file, and black's position is totally hopeless. I won at least dozen tournament games like this. This is very, very poisonous system for white. And unsuspected players for black, inexperienced players, they may get in there very easily. Actually, I have had some very strong players gotten into this terrible position. I have had some grandmasters gotten into nearly lost position right after the opening. Let's go again. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3, d6, bishop f4. Now let's look at some other extreme measures for black in this position. In this position, black has moved like knight h5. This is very unique move. On knight h5 move, I would really recommend you to learn this move order that I'm going to show you now. you have to be very, very accurate here. The only move that makes any sense, even though it doesn't sound right, is bishop to e3. And why? Why don't we go bishop g5? Because remember I said it's not a good idea to give up dark square bishop. Now black can go h6, and after bishop h4, g5, and we don't have any other move but bishop g3. That's what we don't want to go to do, and to give dark square bishop. So we go bishop to e3. Now, how can bishop e3 be good? It is good. Suppose black castles. I've had even in one game, black went f5 against me. Okay, what you do on f5, I played g3. When my opponent castled, I went bishop g2. This is good position for white. My opponent played f4. My opponent was, I don't know, he was either extremely aggressive as a chess player or maybe he was drunk. But either way, it's a good position for white. G takes f, knight takes f4, bishop takes f4, rook takes f4, and queen d2. Rook retreated and castling long. Now, see, this position is real bad for black, because what white does simply h4, h5, and it's very difficult for black to come up with any constructive plan. On knight c6, we can even go d5, and knight e5. I think that's knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, maybe even e3. I'm not sure that's the exactly way it has to be played, but that's possible, one of the possible ways. Knight e4, e3, and f4. So this is possible ways to play this position. Now let's go back again to the bishop e3 position. After bishop e3, knight h5, bishop e3. That's what we have. Now, if black castles, we go g3. This is position. So now what you do is develop bishop g2, castle, rook c1, well, a knight c6, castle. If black goes e5, you can go maybe, I don't know, maybe rook c1, maybe d takes e. Knight on h5 does not look good. So you just simply make normal centralized moves for white, and you have good position. On any f5 move, you can always go bishop g5. And on queen e8, something like knight d5. And you can open center real quick, and white's pieces are better placed here. Okay, this is another attempt for black to demonstrate early activity. Otherwise, after bishop f4, in this position, they should castle, e3, and let's look at another way to play for black. Knight c6, bishop e2, and knight to d7. Now we prepare. When you see that your opponent wants to play e5, you have to be ready to hide your bishop on h2. So I go h3, e5, and bishop h2. Now this is good position for black. For white, if they go f5, black goes f5, we castle. You know that you are never afraid of e4, because after knight d2, white's play on queen side is a lot more significant and is a lot quicker than black's counterplay on king side, because white has supporting bishop on h2 and pawns on a queen side after rook b1, b4 go real quick. So this position, of course, we can analyze a lot deeper and spend another hour maybe, or maybe even longer, analyzing this position. But that's as much as we can afford to analyze now. So I'm giving you an ideas, and it's your job to develop it and use it. again, there is another way for black to play. d4, knight f6, one more way. g6, knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3, d6, bishop f4, castle, e3, and c6. So what is black doing now? Actually, there are two more ways, c6 or c5. Let's look at both of them. Let's look at c5 first. So we go bishop e2, and now after c takes d, e takes d. This is simply bad position. So the reason why this position is bad, because what white is going to do next, they're going to castle, they're going to put the pawn on d5, and then play rook e1, and this is a big superiority in a pawn structure, because white has open e-file, and black has backward pawn on e7, and virtually no counterplay. White is going to play queen d2, rook d1, knight d4, and black is in danger to be under very big pressure. So this is bad position. So the other continuation I wanted to cover is the c6. It's one of the main, maybe, continuations in this opening. So now black castles, e3, c6. So we go h3 now or h3 move later, it doesn't really make difference. Bishop e2, a6, h3, knight d7, white castles, and black plays b5. So this is black's plan, to play on the queen side. The correct way to play for white is to go a3. The reason why we're going a3, because once black is playing on the queen side, we want to organize counterplay in the center, to play in the center. We want to go e4. You cannot go e4 without playing a3, because after e4, b4, you're in danger of losing central pawn on e4, central pawn. So we going a3, and black has to make choices here, make decision here. They may take on c4, but then we play bishop takes c4, and they may go c5. Now, I've had this position few times for white, and I've had it a couple of times for black. I was very unhappy with black, and I was very happy with white. On c5, my opponent played rook e1 and rook c1, but the best move is d5, and we get very bad variety of King's Indian. On knight b6, bishop on a2. It turns out that bishop on a2 is very strong piece, because black now does not have any counterplay. White will go e4 and e5, and bishop on a2 is very good supporter of d5 square and supporter of the play with e5. This is not a good position. The other way to play for after a3 move for black is bishop b7. Then we're going e4. Either bishop b7 or maybe even rook b8 or maybe even rook e8, some move like this. So we can always go e4. And I want to show you one important position from the view of pawn structure. B takes c, bishop takes c4, and d5. Let's talk about this pawn structure. Now, what is the idea behind d5 move? Now, if white takes on d5, then black goes knight b6. And black may be okay here, because bishop has to retreat and then retake pawn on d5 with a pawn or with a knight. But position after d5 is very, very bad for black if white simply plays bishop d3. And now black is practically forced to take on e4, because otherwise white goes e5, and knight takes e4. This position, I think, is not far from being lost for black, because after knight d5 and bishop g3, I find it very difficult for black to play. White puts rooks on e1 and c1, and black, what does black have except for knight on d5? They have nothing. They have a lot of weaknesses, no open files, and no counterplay. This is bad position. Again, we cannot analyze it in details. This is kind of subject for further analysis, which we cannot provide you here. So this would more or less conclude the brief introduction of the system you can play against King's Indian. So you play this, you are ready. You are ready for King's Indian. You can learn it practically overnight, maybe in 1 hour system. Now, the other system, the other openings that left is a Nimzo Indian. d4, knight f6, c4, e6. Actually, Nimzo Indian is not the opening that black chooses. Black may choose, but white has to allow. It's like when both sides agree to play Nimzo Indian, because if white does not play knight c3, there will be no Nimzo Indian. If white goes something like knight f3, there will never be Nimzo Indian, because on bishop b4 check, we can go simply bishop d2. And that's what I would recommend to play. On bishop b4 check, you go bishop d2, and it's the easy way then to play g3 and bishop g2. Now, again, we cannot go into very big details of it. It's on bishop b4, you go bishop d2, and on queen e7, it's one of the major continuous. You simply go g3, on a knight c6, bishop g2, and on bishop takes d2, knight takes d2. That's what modern theory of Bogo Indian. This is Bogo Indian now. Just castle, and after e5, the simple system I would recommend you to play, that you know what you will be doing. e3, and on castle, try to go rook b1 and b4. That's an easy play for you. If black ever goes e4, you always can go knight e1 and recycle knight from c2 to d5, knight d4, or maybe b5 and knight b4. So this is very reasonable position. This is like a brief plan introduction, and if you want anything more than that, more detailed analysis, a more detailed suggestion on this opening, again, as in other cases, I would recommend you to refer to opening publications. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3. But suppose b6 move is played, which is Queen's Indian. What can you play here? We have several very complicated variations to play, very ambitious. Well, if you want to learn them, be my guest and go ahead and learn them. We can go g3 and bishop a6, and there's a lot of theory, but you want to avoid any theory. This is only for people who have practically no knowledge what to play here, and they want to learn it quickly, the opening, because they have a tournament in 1 hour and they have to play it. So for those people, on move like b6, I would recommend bishop g5, and after h6, maybe simply take on f6, queen takes f6, and go e3 and bishop e2, and when bishop b4 check, go knight d2. This is the simple way to play opening. Bishop b7, bishop e2. Then you castle short. You will not have an advantage, I can guarantee you, but you will have simple and easy to play position. Even if you castle here, and whatever black plays, you go a3 next move. You will have simple position with a clear plan to play in the center, and you are totally out of danger. You are bypass the opening, and you would know what to do. So this is how to learn opening real quick. So this is on Nimzo Indian. You have two choices. Actually, if your opponent plays d4, knight f6, and c4, e6, you can either learn the modern theory, pick the variation. Actually, I have tapes made on this subject, on Nimzo Indian and Bogo Indian, detailed analysis. But if you choose not to get in there, but play easy way out, then that's as much as I can give you now, quickly. Now, after d4, knight f6, c4, e6, you go knight f3. Now, if black goes d5, then you transpose to queen's gambit. Declined. If black goes b4, you transpose to Bogo Indian, and you go g3 and bishop g2 castle. And if black goes b6, you go bishop g5. And on h6, simply take on f6 and continue development with e3 and bishop e2. That's as simple as that. So now, another opening that is very, very important, and where you have to know some concrete variations, is Grunfeld defense. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5. You cannot apply approach that we have in Nimzo Indian or Bogo Indian to Grunfeld, because Grunfeld is one of the openings where position opens in a very early stage of the game. And in the very early stage of the game, you cannot use just the general approach. When position is open, you have to know exactly what you're doing. So I would recommend, the way I would recommend is knight f3, bishop g7, and now one of the continuations I would recommend is bishop g5 for some people, which gives you very simple position, easy to understand, and the other one is c takes d. I will give you a quick introduction to two systems. Why am I giving you two systems? I have no preference to one from another. I have no preference, but the reason, because I give you your pick. Why do I give you one continuation in every other opening and two in Grunfeld? Because Grunfeld is a lot sharper opening than any other opening in the after d4. King's Indian may be complicated opening, but not so sharp. It's a big difference between complicated and sharp. So if we play bishop f4 and e3 variation in King's Indian, we simplified. You cannot simplify as well Grunfeld defense. So let's go with Grunfeld. d5, knight f3, bishop g7. And let's start with the variation A, which is bishop g5. This is an easy way to play this opening, and you can learn it in about 5-10 minutes. You may not get an advantage, but you will know what to play. And then I will show you a little more ambitious continuation. Bishop g5, knight e4. That's the move to expect. That's the main move. C takes d. Knight takes g5. Knight takes g5. White has an extra pawn, but black is getting it back right away by playing e6. Hitting the knight. Queen takes g5 is a threat. So white goes knight f3. E takes d. And now e3. Now, this position reminds me a lot the position of Queen's Gambit decline that we had a little while ago. We analyzed the same plan what white is going to play, bishop d3, queen c2, then go b4, b5, after black plays c6, b5, and play pawn minority attack. We already looked at it. The way you can do it is after e6, knight f3, ed, e3, castle. You can start with b4 move right away. So what you want to do, what are you attacking? You are not attacking c6 pawn because pawn is not on c6 yet. But once you put enough pressure on d5 pawn, black will play c6, and then you have to play, your plan is pawn minority attack. Black has also counter chances. They can go knight d7, knight b6, bishop e6. Well, you play that. That's the easy way to learn. It's okay to play for white. Now, the more ambitious continuation and a lot more ambitious way to play for white is next. Playing d4, knight f6, c4. After g6, knight c3, d5. We can go knight f3 first, or we can go with the c takes d. Doesn't matter. C takes d. Let's start with c takes d. Knight takes d5 and g3. You could have played g3 even in this position. Remember, I saw if you played instead of g3, instead of cd, knight f3 first, bishop g7, and this is the position where there is a choice white has to make, either go cd or bishop g5. So suppose the continuation that I'm just mentioned as ambitious, c takes d, knight takes d5, and of course main modern theory is e4, but we don't want to do it because e4 you have to learn a lot. You don't have to learn a lot here. One line and you will be better prepared than your opponent. I can guarantee you, because that's not the line they can pick up anywhere in theory. g3, castle, bishop g2. Now, the most popular move, this is very popular, very famous position. Knight c6, castle, and knight b6. This is the key position of fianchetto variation of Grunfeld, which happened maybe thousands of times on any level, especially the high level, but they play it on much lower level as well. And the move that was played here for white in over 90% of the time is e3, because the pawn on d4 is hanging and e3 is the move. But move I recommend is bishop f4. It's much less known move with some very interesting ideas. Quickly, let's run through the possibilities black may have. Knight takes d4, most obvious. One continuation, bishop e6, and bishop g4. Those are the three continuations we can consider. Now let's go and analyze them all. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4. And here, black has three ways to play. Queen takes d4, bishop takes d4, and e5. Let's look at it in any order, in random order, because there is no order that is important to know, to learn it with. Queen takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop takes d4, and knight b5. White has some advantage and difficult to play for black position. On bishop takes b2, rook b1. And on bishop g7, knight takes c7. It's difficult position for black. And on rook b8, simply knight d5. Really difficult game for black. Okay, let's go on. Knight d5, and important thing that bishop f5 is not working because knight takes e7. followed by knight takes f5 and bishop takes b8. So in this position, after queen takes d4, what you play is you exchange queens and go knight b5, and if black goes e5, you simply play bishop h6. Black is in bad shape here. I'm giving you information, and it's your job to double check it. You cannot just trust me that I said this or you can play. You can trust me. It's a good idea to play so, but the reason why you have to double check, because you will feel a lot more comfortable when you play it yourself. So let's go quickly with the other two continuations. We just covered queen takes d4. Same thing happens on bishop takes d4. You go knight b5, and if black goes e5, same bishop h6 move. And if bishop takes on b2, same rook b1 move. Nothing has changed. Maybe even queen takes d8, rook takes d8, and now rook b1 move. Same exact problem black is having. And the third and more important move actually was maybe the main move in this position, is e5. Let's quickly run through this continuation. Knight c6. Well, taking on c6 is not a good idea because white simply plays bishop e3 and black is in bad shape. And again, you can see black has a lot of weaknesses. White just piles up on c-file, and black is in trouble. The correct move here is queen takes d1. Then we go knight e7 check, king h8, rook f takes d1. Black must take bishop on f4. White plays knight takes c8, rook a takes c8, bishop takes b7, rook b8, and bishop a6. After f takes g, h takes g, position is difficult for black. The key move in this position, which I had it once in my game, on bishop takes c3, bc, knight a4 looks like very strong for black, because on rook d7, black has knight c5. Otherwise, they want to play rook b2, but after rook d5, black has significant difficulties. A knight takes c3, we may even go rook a5, followed by either rook c1 or bishop d3 and a7 pawn weakness. This is difficult position for black. That's something you just have to analyze also from this position, which we cannot do now. Analyze, and you will come to the same conclusion. I strongly recommend to use some engine, some program like Fritz or Hierarchs or one of those programs. So let's go on to the critical position of this variation, which is right after move bishop f4. This is the critical position, which will be set up in a moment. Bishop f4. Okay, another continuation is bishop to e6. On bishop e6, the good move here is queen to c1. And let's see why queen c1 gives an advantage. Now, black is in danger after, if it was white's move now, white will play rook d1 and black has zero counterplay. And then while simply can advance in the center, and black is going to have a problem. So knight takes d4, practically forced. Knight takes d4, and now black must recapture with the queen. Taking with the bishop is real bad after rook d1. Must recapture with the queen. bishop takes b7, rook a to b8. Now I developed this system and I have had it in my game, and correct move here is, only correct move is bishop f3. Bishop to g2 is not a good move because black equalizes immediately. Now let me show you the difference between bishop f3 and bishop g2. Now after bishop f3, after bishop g2, let me say why it's not good, because black simply goes knight a4. You see, attacking the knight. Now you don't want to take this knight because after queen takes a4, b2 pawn is real weak. So you have to play rook d1, and then black has knight takes c3. That's the key. You see, pawn on e2 is not protected, and after rook takes queen, black wins with knight takes e2 check. So for this reason, you have to play bishop to f3. Now, after knight a4, we go rook d1. And actually the better move here, maybe in this position, after bishop f3, knight a4, rook d1, I think black is really in trouble, because on queen b4, we have several ways of getting an advantage. Knight takes a4 is the simplest way. Queen takes a4 and rook d2. This position is much better for white, because they can, what they want to do, they want to play simply b3, attack the queen, and play rook b1. They have better pawn structure, better bishops, and black has weaknesses. Now, of course, black does not have to play knight a4, but if they go knight c4, that's what happened in one of my games. Then we simply go rook d1, queen b6. Now we go b3, queen b4. That's what happened in the game. Knight d5,